Everyone. I hope you're having a great week. I reviewed the article on religiosity, spirituality in relation to disordered eating and body image concerns. This was a systematic review, and the main purpose was to critically examine the existing literature surrounding the relationship between religious and spiritual practices, disordered eating, and body image concerns. They wanted to really find out if religious and spiritual beliefs and practices really had a positive, a negative, or a non significant effect on body image and disordered eating. And some of the components that they cited were coping with stress or the belief of sacredness of the body, as well as body deprivation as a form of reaching sanctity. So, all in all, over 1,100 studies were considered initially based off of a very basic search on electronic databases. These studies were all quantitative studies and they explored non clinical samples of men and women. After eliminating articles for duplication and specific exclusion criteria, like they excluded clinical samples, for example, 22 final articles were reviewed. 15 of these were evaluating female participants only, 2 included only males, and 5 included both genders. These studies were primarily based in the US, and there were a few that were coming out of Canada and a few that came out of Israel. So I thought that was really interesting that they included different geographic regions. One difficulty of this study is the act of trying to measure spirituality and religiosity. That's very difficult and very subjective. So that's definitely hard as far as research goes. Studies did account for this via confounding, though, in their analysis, and still only 4 studies were graded as being able to provide fairly strong evidence for their conclusions. This is strongly correlation-based, so direct conclusions are not really an option right now. Correlation does not mean causation, but I think it lays the groundwork for a lot of good future research. So, into this analysis specifically, studies specifically investigating religiosity, spirituality in relation to disordered eating and psychopathology. These results were a little mixed. They were kind of all over the place. Most of them deemed it a positive relationship, a few negative, and a few non-significant. But in relation to body image, 80% of the articles reported positive associations with religiosity and spirituality. So overall, the main findings were that a strong and internalized religious spiritual belief was linked to less disordered eating and body image concern. Now, the intrinsic and internalized religious and spiritual belief was thought to be vital to these conclusions because they described it as less of a superficial belief and following practices just out of obligation and more of the relational aspect that you can get from religious and spiritual beliefs. And these were thought to be the primary reasons for the results and the conclusions that were drawn from this analysis. So I think this area of research is really interesting, but I think it's going to have to lean hard into the world of qualitative data and the data of people's personal experiences. And I think that's just where it's going to have to land whenever we're looking at religious and spiritual practices, because there's such a diversity out there and they have it's so personal, as is eating disorder work, body image work. All of this is very connected to your inner being and what you truly believe about yourself and your place in the world. This analysis included 3 different countries. Like I said earlier, it did scratch the surface of the cultural aspect, but I think as the literature grows, the potential for cross-cultural studies and analyses will grow as well. It was a great read and a great consideration. I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys do.